Hello my debaucherous darlings, and welcome back to the Gothetect. So today I'm doing a bit of a glow up slash fixing an old piece sort of project. I have this beautiful old vintage mirror and I absolutely love this mirror, but unfortunately a while back it fell and it broke.
No! No!
Now, being the absolute raccoon that I am, I could not bring myself to throw the mirror out even though it had broken, and I'm going to try today to bring it back to life. I really love that we're having this moment right now where everything gets an aesthetic name, and I recently came across the aesthetic Gothic cottagecore, and it is hella vibey. Now, the Gothic cottagecore vibe has a bit of a, I am a haunted witch and I'm wandering through the overgrown woods at night looking for my beautiful cabin, and I'm very much here for this aesthetic. My general energy and aesthetic overall, I would say, has this, I am a shadowy figure and I would follow a ghost into a cemetery in the middle of the night looking to celebrate the full moon kind of vibe. And I really love that the Gothic cottagecore kind of aesthetic really suits this. So I'm using this aesthetic as inspiration to DIY and fix this old vintage mirror that I have. And I actually think this DIY is going to be super simple, and I definitely think it's something that you could adjust or change depending on what your aesthetic is, and I think it's a really accessible, easy project. So here is the plan. I'm going to take the frame of the mirror and I'm going to paint it black. And then because the mirror is broken and cracked, I'm going to glue it back together, and I'm going to do a Kintsugi method on the cracks to highlight the beauty of them. Now, if you're not familiar with Kintsugi, it's this beautiful Japanese art form where they use gold or silver inlay on their ceramics when they break. And I think this is a really beautiful analogy where even if something is broken, it's not truly broken. It can be fixed and it can be made into something that's really beautiful again. And I really like that that is so in line with a lot of the reuse and recycle and upcycling sustainability goals that I have. Once I've got the mirror back together, I'm going to decorate and line the mirror with a moss aesthetic. Again, I'm trying to pull in this Gothic cottagecore vibe, and I think it's gonna provide a beautiful ephemeral look to the mirror. So I think this will actually be a really simple project, and I'm excited to get going. And the first step, like most of my projects, is to paint it black. So I got the frame all painted up, and I have a couple really great tricks for you. I did end up using chalk paint for this, which is really simple and really easy. It minimizes the need to sand and things like that. However, it usually takes 2 to 3 coats. Another really great trick that I love is using these awesome little paint triangles. They hold your item up above the surface, and so it makes it much easier to paint. It dries better. It's just a much easier way to get through a painting process. I love these little triangles so much, and I will make sure to pop them into the description, so if you want to pick them up, you can. So I'm going to glue the mirror up, and then I'm going to let everything dry, and I will see you lovelies tomorrow. So everything is dried and ready to go. I made sure to allow the mirror adhesive enough time to fully cure and set up. Something you want to make sure that you do, just read the back of the container. Whatever you get for the adhesive is going to tell you exactly how long you should wait for it. And essentially I just glued it to the backing that originally came with the mirror because it's going to add rigidity for the mirror itself. So now I'm going to be working on the broken pieces and fixing this crack in the style of the Kintsugi method. So there really are a bunch of ways that you could do something like this. A very easy way would be to just use gold paint over the crack, and I think that would totally work. I'm gonna try something different. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hot glue over this seam, and then I'm gonna gold leaf over the hot glue bead once it's dried completely. I like the idea of the gold leaf portion having this raised profile from the hot glue, and so I think this could be a really interesting way to add a bit of depth to this piece. I am really loving how this is turning out. I think the hot glue with the gold leaf is a really great and interesting way to do this, to get something that feels almost like a welded bead of gold. And that was something I was really interested in trying, is essentially getting something that feels more like a textured object. Something to note that ended up happening with the gold leaf and hot glue, I started out with putting the hot glue bead on and then letting it dry fully, and then using the gold leaf adhesive to try to do that. And it ended up making the hot glue slide around on the mirror. I think the glues were incompatible and it kind of de-adhesed the hot glue from the mirror. And so I went back and I just reran the hot glue beads again, and then while it was still tacky, I put the gold leaf on the hot glue instead of using the gold leaf adhesive. And so if you wanted to try something like this, I would recommend going that route rather than using the gold leaf adhesive, because there was definitely some incompatibility going on between the two glues. The next thing I'm going to do is get the border of the frame stapled back to the backing. That way we're ready to get started on the next part. Now, the best part of a project like this in my mind is this stage that we're at, which is kind of the make chaos and do no wrong creatively part. I essentially have a bunch of this really beautiful moss, and you can get this at any craft store. I have a back stock of a bunch of different types, and I just laid it out and played with it until I found a layout that I think looks aesthetically pleasing to me. I think a really good designer trick here is to think about doing things asymmetrically. Our eyes are trained to see symmetrical things, and so when you try to replicate symmetry, if it's not really, really perfect, it can look a little funny. And so I tend to do things that are intentionally asymmetrical, because then it doesn't look off if it's not perfect. And I think the joy of a project like this is it specifically isn't perfect. That's kind of the whole point of this whole piece, is it's meant to be a statement about beautiful things are imperfect things. I also chose to use these really interesting long tendril moss pieces. I think it creates a lot of depth and personality having these kind of drippy pieces coming off the mirror. I like the idea that it's almost like this magical world just springing forth from the broken part of the mirror. I think the really cool thing about a project like this is there's a lot of versatility and creativity here. You could definitely do moss in the crack instead of the gold leaf, which I think could definitely be a really beautiful way to go about this. Or you could do flowers instead of moss. I think there's a million different ways that you could do this. So if this is a project you're thinking of taking on, I would love to hear about what you're doing. So comment below if you're thinking about doing this and what sort of flowers and moss and botanicals you would be using. And now that I have a sense of where all these pieces are gonna go, I'm gonna glue it down with the glue to end all glues, hot glue. This has been such a simple project. I really recommend trying this out. A really great tip if you're doing hot glue gun related things, picking up some of these little silicone thimbles. They make it so you don't burn your little fingers so much, and I could not have survived this particular project without them. Again, I'm gonna link a lot of the products and stuff that I've used down below. This project is looking so good. I'm gonna let everything dry and then assemble the mirror, and then we get to take a look at the amazing final results. I am so insanely pleased with how the mirror came out. I really love this because I think it's important not to stress too much about perfection in life. I think perfectionism is the enemy of creativity, and so I really think this is a beautiful way to highlight the journey of this mirror. I think it's a really great analogy because I think culturally we stress too much and don't always love ourselves enough, and I think there's the symbiosis with having a mirror that's constantly going to remind me to not focus on the imperfections. There really is a lot of beauty in imperfect things. Thank you so much for tuning in with me for all this DIY nonsense. If you enjoyed yourself, feel free to hit subscribe and click the notification bell so you will know every time we are getting up to some creative goodness here at the Gothetect. If you'd like to support the channel, check out our Patreon. We do a really great after show called the Mortem, where I go into more detail about the ins and outs of the project, and I give you a lot more insight on how this happened. It also helps to ensure that we're able to continue to make awesome creative content for you. Until next time, be creative, live fully, and memento mori.